Hi, this is Adam from Beyond Medicine, and today I'd like to talk about the concept of immortality. Now, obviously, this is a huge subject spanning many disciplines, but what I'd like to talk about is, the different areas where any serious attempt at immortality needs to be working on. Um, in Beyond Medicine, we've tried to work on a number of these factors, but part of it as we proceed through this is mapping the field of seeing what the terrain looks like. Imagine the seven servants of death, and we have to defeat each of them individually. What would be the names of these servants, and what would they look like, and how do we go about defeating them? And some of them are not as obvious as others because yeah, they only come out as we move through the field of death. The obvious ones would be, the physiological components, the reversing of aging, and here we have the immortal jellyfish and things like astragalus, which lengthen the telomeres. The immortal jellyfish regenerates the cells, and brings us back to an earlier version of ourselves. But we also have to look at our disease inheritance quotient, if you like, our tendency towards disease, because this would tend to, kill us ultimately. So unless we're dealing with this, even if we have a greater longevity, we'll still fall prey to disease and die. Not unlike the jellyfish, which is not immune to disease, it just is able to regenerate itself endlessly. So what we have to really look at is, how we can prolong our life and stay young and healthy at the same time. Now, when you look at Chinese medicine, they talk about 70% of diseases all originates in the mental emotional sphere. So the suppression of emotions, the frustrations, the angers, the fears, the anxieties, the unexpressed desires, all of this mental emotional quotient turns into disease sooner or later. It fills up the different channels and eventually turns into disease. And we see this often. People's anger might end up in liver cancer, or their frustration or their agitation might result in hypertension, or there's a number of associations. Anxiety might end up in kidney problems. But so in order to actually look at any long-term immortality, we have to look at disease. Otherwise, it's even if we do the best with everything we've got and regenerate the cells, and we don't deal with the mind and the emotion, we're still going to get caught in that, because sooner or later we're going to fall prey to disease and we will get sick and die. We might prolong it, but if we're really looking at true immortality, which means living forever, we have to deal with disease as a part of this. So this is where there's remedies, and this is where the mantras come in, where the Ushnisha Vijaya mantra, which is around clearing out the subconscious and the unconscious, is very useful, because that allows a lot of the stuff that was hidden to come to light. All the core programming that is determining our actions is flushed out. People have radical revelations and cures from this, because it's once you unplug a lot of the mental emotional causes of disease, there's no longer any need for the physical to manifest. In a sense, the physical is just the tip of the iceberg, but what's underneath is the mind and the emotions. And we notice the physical, like say the stiffness of arthritis, but the truth is we're stiffening up on a deeper level because of some frustration or fear or unexpressed emotion. So once we deal with that, then the physicals will often just dissipate. The body will reconstruct itself, which obviously is what we want. Then there are the more nebulous things, the memes, the history. So the memes, I mean, everyone's saying like, oh, nothing's certain except death and taxes. We take this as an accepted fact. We're confronted with this as a belief structure which is irrevocable, is ineffable. We have no choice but to be subject to this. But I mean, this has been up until now, but we do have creatures like the jellyfish and various, worms and the rock lobster lives a very long time. There are very long-lived creatures and species. Obviously, trees can live for thousands of years. So even this narrative, which is kind of what we have, is not an absolute. And once we escalate it from being an absolute into like a relative as a possibility, as like, well, we will live as long as we're able to live, and there's no necessary limit on it, as long as we stay healthy and we regenerate and we do the long life practices. I mean, of this, I'm including everything from ice bathing, meditation, yoga, proper diet, exercise, the things that keep us healthy, that actually facilitate the lengthening of the telomeres. And there's a lot of this, the biohacking stuff is big on the physical activities which will keep us younger. Obviously there's a lot of debate around diet and what the right diet is, but there is some agreement around foods that will tend to lengthen the telomeres or allow the telomeres not to shorten, and foods which will radically shorten the telomeres, which translates into less replications and then old age and death. So, there's a lot of agreement, and there's a lot of the focus has been on these physical things, these mindsets, these practices, the cold bathing, the meditations, the yogas, the breath work, and then, the direct biohacking, which people, think of as like, okay, well, if they do certain sets of activities or actions, this will rewire their brains in certain ways, which will ensure that they live longer. Then there's the plants. There's various plants which lengthen the telomeres. I mean, I mentioned astragalus, there's ginseng, there's a number of other ones, and various other herbs will promote longevity. So, but what I'm proposing here is all of that and more. There is the entire human history, where we have to look at human history and say, well, has anyone ever lived forever before? And there are tales of such things, and longevity, especially within the Chinese Taoist tradition, there are tales of longevity and like bringing the energy down to last long or live longer. Yogis in the Himalayas have been known to live for hundreds of years. But normally these are kept in the reserve of the enlightened beings, or those of such high evolution or training and practice that it's not really available to the general population. And so we kind of put this in our head, out of mind, like this is not possible. But what I'm proposing, what I'm seeing, especially in the group, the New Immortals, is that people are becoming younger. They are actually literally becoming younger, either stopping their age or actually actively reversing it. But I believe the more angles we come at this from, because what the enemy here is our own biochemistry, the fact that we're given a certain number of years to live, and at that point the body breaks down, and that's kind of mediated by the telomeres. Or if you look at it from a Chinese medicine point of view, like kidney qi, life force, or jing, these energetic forces which give us life, and as we get older they sort of seep away and diminish, and then the bones get weaker, and then the body stops replicating as well, and zombie DNA creeps in, and the whole system gets gummed up. It's like there's a bit of dirt in the oil, and then everything starts to get a bit rusty and not work as well, and then the errors create more errors, and then that slowly breaks down. In addition, of course, to one's disease process, which is running as well and tends to come out the older we get. So there's all this bundled in together when we look at immortality, and we really have to look at it like, okay, well, I can't just do one of these things and hope I'm going to make it. I really have to focus on all of these areas and work to some extent in all of these areas in order to prolong my life and potentially live forever. I mean, there's no saying, I'm not saying that this is necessarily possible, because I just don't know at this point. I do know is that I'm getting younger. So this is what I can speak to and about. I've noticed people who are in their 60s who are doing fantastically. They're not aging in the traditional way. They're still running up mountains and surfing. It's not like anything is set in stone. But what we do see as well, that once people get to a certain age, post 70 plus, the body gets quite weak, and to reverse it then is a lot harder. I've seen this with my cat. I let him get old and I'm trying to reverse it, but it says the aging process is like it's gone to a certain point and it's hard to bring it back. So what we learned from this is to begin the process early. I mean, in terms of practices, mindset, view, memes around death itself and how we see ourselves. A lot of people are in their heads, they've got this idea of like, okay, well, I'm going to work till I'm 60 or 65, and then hopefully I'll retire with a nice place and enough money to last me for another 20 years or so, and then I'll die. This is the movie they're running, and they kind of build their whole reality around this. But obviously, if we're going to live for much longer time, we have to build a reality where we're not going to run out of money, or we continue to work because we're not getting old. But both of these require a radical reassembly of the mindset, because in our minds, we're preparing for a certain amount of time, and psychologically, we're building a reality around that. When we're no longer doing that, we have to literally restructure the entire thing. We have to say, look, I potentially could live forever, so I better build myself a base whereby I can live forever financially. I have to ensure that I'm not going to get bored, because if I get bored, I might just jump off a cliff. So I have to keep myself active and alive and engaged with activities. So the normal thing of like, okay, get old, go to the coast, hang out with your friends, drink a bit of coffee, have meals, and then slowly get older and older and then die. That has to go completely. You have to chuck that out entirely. And I mean, to some extent, even the concept of retirement has to go as well, because if you're loving what you do, there's no need necessarily to retire. And if you retire, you can take up some other activity or travel or whatever it might be. But what I'm proposing here is that unless we work this in as an entire program, as a worldview with practices and activities and medicines, the immortalities that one takes, and shifted mindsets and the use of the herbs and the biohacking techniques and the right diet and exercise, and I think this is going to be quite difficult. And of course, disease. We have to deal with disease and our tendency to get disease and our predisposition, which is our subconscious, which is storing a lot of the stuff that will turn into disease because it's unexpressed or undealt with. So this is really what needs to happen in order for immortality, true immortality, to happen. Now, we're about 3 years into this experiment. Well, me and my new mortal crew are. So I can't speak with tremendous authority except to say that most of the people who've come along with this have shown rejuvenative effects and are getting younger. What has been very important to me is to look at, like, where is the water leaking out of the boat? Where are they still getting older? Is it a concept, a belief structure, a meme, a doubt, or is it society saying, look, you can't do this? So they're like, okay, better go along with society, because they don't want to fight society. I'll say I'm going to get old and die, and then I'll be one of the herd, or I'll be accepted, because this is how people work. People are accepted if they go along with the popular consensus. Those that go against the popular consensus are often vilified, or treated as if they're heretics or they're breaking with the human identity. It's like, I've even had people saying, like, to me, why do you want to live forever? Like, it's like weird stuff, like I'm attacking them, so they're attacking me back. Like, what I'm doing is a threat to their life. And I mean, maybe, I guess it is, on the sense, if I'm proposing something else, what I'm requiring from them is to completely change all their ideas on life and death. So, and that's quite a challenge for a lot of people, because they've got this version, and in this version they get to 65, they retire, they kick around for another 20 years, and then they die. That's it. If they're lucky, if they don't get some terrible disease beforehand and end up on horrible meds and sort of, or in a wheelchair, or dying of some cancer. So I mean, this is what you're competing with. So the alternative, like, we can break this narrative, is quite powerful. I mean, then there's the believers who believed before and then haven't had it delivered to them, so they become skeptics. Now they don't believe in anything. They don't believe it's possible because they don't want to get hurt. They've been betrayed before by people promising them stuff, and it hasn't delivered. But what I've seen, and I can only talk from the last 3-4 years of experience, is that we are all getting younger and stronger. I'm more healthy now than I was 5 years ago. And as one moves into one's 50s, things start to degrade, but this is not happening. It's going the other way. So there is hope, on every level for people with this. And I do believe that, I'm completely relentless in my pursuit of this. I will find all the holes in the boat. And it's almost like as soon as I find one, there's another one. But then each one I plug, I know there's less and less potential holes. There's less and less place for the water to escape. Now, it doesn't require that we do all of these activities all at once, because that would just consume all our time. But if there's 5 or 6 or 7 areas and we're working quite solidly in like 4 or 5 of them, including taking the immortality range to regenerate ourselves. So we're actually getting that as a message, because once we're feeling younger and stronger and more full of life, we're more likely to make the right food choices. Exercising becomes easy because we've got lots of energy, almost too much energy. We need to exercise just to calm down a bit. So in that sense, um, once we do that, then it's much easier to do the other pieces. And then we see that, and that reinforces the belief that it is possible. And then we look around and see everyone else, and it's like, okay, well, they're also being commented on how young and youthful they're looking for their age. And this reinforces it. Then we build our own meme field, which is basically saying we can do this. But it's a delicate thing at this stage. It needs to be nourished, because if one exposes it to the general population will vilify it, because this is what people do. If they don't understand something, or it threatens their worldview, they will try to destroy it. This is just the way of human life. But as it moves into the narrative more and more people are talking about biohacking and longevity, and more people are engaging with, ice cold baths and doing breath work. They're seeing that, life extension certainly is possible. I see this as the life extension is like, that's definite. The immortality, I think, is definitely possible. And I certainly will continue to pursue this and plug any holes that I see in the whole picture, because, it if we don't plug all the holes, something will leak out and then the boat will sink. But each time I plug a hole, there's less and less of the potential for anything to go wrong. But it's work in progress. But I just thought I'd bring this to everyone's attention, that this is how I'm thinking around the whole immortality thing. And this is what I've come to after 3 or 4 years of experimentation with the jellyfish, and specifically the mantras, like the long life mantras, the Ushnisha Vijaya, and then the Waitara mantra, which are both longevity and health, radiant health mantras that deals with disease A and long life as well. So this is being covered from many angles, and this multi-angular approach is often what it takes to really bring this whole thing to fruition. This is Adam from Beyond Medicine, just talking about immortality and how we approach it.